Hello everybody, I'm here today with Eytan Lenko, who's a director at a fast-growing Australian startup company called Outware. They do software development, a lot of mobile software development. So welcome Eytan.
Thank you.
Could you just tell us a little bit about your journey, because you actually started as a software developer and now you're leading a fast-growing company of 110 people. What has that journey been like?
Yeah, sure. So I guess my background, I studied engineering at university, at software engineering, and went on to become a software engineer. And I guess from pretty early on in my career, it wasn't so much about sitting at the computer and coding, it was also about that human element. So I moved into consulting. I did a lot of freelance and contract work where I was working closely with the people that I was building the software for, like trading systems, working with traders, that sort of thing. And then I worked here and I worked overseas. And I guess around 2009, which was when we started out, where I got together with a couple of old friends, and we saw a big opportunity in terms of mobile. The iPhone was out, the App Store had just opened up, and we saw that there was a big opportunity for everyone at that point. Everyone was talking about kind of gimmicky apps and fart apps and all that sort of stuff, and there's kind of these apps that were kind of winning the jackpot. But we could see that the apps were going to be a pretty serious thing in the corporate world, and they were really going to change the way that everybody did stuff. So we thought if we could work to build a great team, a local team based in Australia that could build great apps and satisfy that need, that would be a good kind of niche to get into. And it kind of, I remember sitting around early with the other two guys. In the early days, we were doing the coding ourselves, and we were doing everything ourselves, obviously. And we kind of had this vision that we'd get to become a boutique company, maybe 10 people. So we weren't quite expecting at that point that we'd grow to within 5 years to be over 100 people in 5 years.
Yeah.
So in terms of my journey within the company, I started off as kind of programming when I needed to, but also going out and pitching to customers. So it really was just wearing lots of different hats. I think I remember we had really low. I think for the first probably 2.5 to 3 years of the company, we had almost no turnover. Everyone was really involved and passionate, working closely with the founders. We had a few people leave, just because, I don't know, they were going to live overseas or things like that. But basically, there was effectively almost no turnover. And then we kind of got to the point where we just had a little bit of a spate of people that had been with the company for a while. 2 or 3 or 4 of them kind of leaving in a kind of a bit of a similar time. And we were like, that was really a big moment for the directors to think about. Look, well, obviously they're people that we used to spend a lot of time with. We don't spend as much time with them anymore because the company's kind of grown and we're so busy, and we don't go out for lunch with the team every day. So our finger's not on the pulse as much anymore in terms of the culture and what people are doing and how people are feeling. And also there's a whole lot of other stuff that we were interested in. We were beginning to, as we were growing and we were winning bigger pieces of work, we needed to make sure that we had a more aligned skill set to what we were trying to achieve. As we were basically we were becoming more structured as a company, and we needed to kind of have a bit more structure in the way that we did our HR. So, so that was really kind of the trigger, was around, making sure that we're doing something about retention and guaranteeing kind of the continuation of our culture, but also kind of structuring HR a little bit better so that, not every salary review is kind of ad hoc, a negotiation with the directors kind of one-on-one, that we have, pay scales and that sort of thing. I remember when we were about 10, 15 people, we kind of all sat down and we did just amongst ourselves, one of those sessions where we work out what the values of Outware is, what it means to be someone working at Outware, and what kind of person. Because I guess that was the point where we were really starting to accelerate in our growth, and we were, could see we were going to have a lot of new people joining the team. And I guess we had this kind of core early team that really wanted to put their stamp on what the culture of the company was going to be.
How do you go about identifying people within that group? Because we're talking about people who like sitting there, coding stuff, thinking about their code all day, get a lot of enjoyment from that. So how do you identify people within that group who actually want to be leaders and who are suitable to be leaders?
Yeah, that actually wasn't a massive challenge for us. I think by the nature of our work, because it's project-based and there's a lot of client interaction,
Right.
it was pretty easy to see the developers that were, it was easy to see that obviously the developers that are really great technically, but also the ones that kind of, were better at interacting with the clients and were, more able to get across, to communicate what they were doing. There were a lot of, there's developers that they'll encounter a problem and they'll sit and write an email or a message or not do anything.
Yeah.
And there's developers that'll kind of, there's a few people that'll actually pick up the phone and have a conversation and try to work something out and be proactive on the communication front. So I think those were the guys that kind of naturally, became the leaders in the development team. And I think that was also just, it was a bit of self-selection there as well. I think, that it's kind of, you put a bunch of developers together and somebody will generally come up as the lead and start organising people and taking the lead on stand-ups and things like that.
Right. So let's move on to the subject of building high-performing groups within the organisation. Really super. You are a high-performing company when you've grown incredibly well. Just tell us about how you actually have gone about building those high-performing groups.
So I think there's a few things. Obviously, the key thing is really aligning everybody so that they all understand. I think particularly a company that's growing fast, obviously you're going to have your humps and there's points of high pressure and points where it's a bit more relaxed. But to get people over the humps and to keep morale up and have everyone do it with good spirits, it's really important that they understand why. Why they're being asked to push hard and why. What the purpose is. Is it really just about this one project and this one client, or is it about a bigger vision?
Is there a bigger vision?
Yeah. So when we were a small company, when we were a smaller company, it was pretty easy because the directors were obviously there, they were visible, you could talk to them, you could have lunch with them.
Yeah.
And then I think about last year, we started getting a lot of feedback from the team that they were losing sight of what that vision was and why they were being asked to go in a particular way, or people might disagree with why we were doing one project and not another project, or they didn't see where it all fit together.
Yeah.
So so we did a piece of work where we got everyone's input around building a new vision for the company, and we had to. I guess the directors had to kind of think, do we do a big seminar and say this is Outware's vision that we've come up with and these are the words and that's what it is.
Yeah.
But we just didn't. We've got a very smart team of people.
Right.
And we just knew that we had to get buy-in from everyone. Everyone had to kind of input into that. But then the flip side of that was, we started the process and we started, having a survey of asking people questions about the way they think about the company and where they think it could go. Having some talks and discussions around that. It was almost like the feedback a little bit the other way as well. Like, don't you guys know where we're going? Why are you asking us? So it was kind of finding that mix between, us. These are the kind of this is the box of, this is the things that the directors and founders, this is the area that we want to play in the market that we're playing in.
Right.
But within that, we'll give you guys the freedom to kind of think about where we want to go and why we want to do it. And obviously that was a kind of a to and fro and a conversation as well.
Yeah.
Software historically has been quite a messy business because you kind of say, I'm going to do this piece of work in 6 months, and then 6 months later you discover that you're only halfway through it and that all of your assumptions are wrong and everyone's upset and it's a big mess. So I guess Agile and Scrum came out of a desire to make that whole process a lot more transparent and a lot more kind of trackable, and also giving a lot more flexibility to kind of change path along the way.
Yeah.
So I think the idea is basically that you break the requirements of the project down into as small a chunk as possible, and that's called a story. And then you kind of gather together a bunch of stories, and that's into a 2-week period of work that's called a sprint or an iteration. And then your team kind of work through that and see how far they get through that sprint. And then after a few sprints, you get a good idea of how many stories you can complete. Obviously, each story has a level of complexity. It's given a number of points, and you add those number of points up, and you get a velocity for your team. So what that means is that every 2 weeks you've got a checkpoint. You do a showcase where you can show this is our progress, because each story should be, from a user's perspective, a functionally complete piece of work. So you should be able to show that you've gone from there to there, and this is what we've done, and get the feedback. And if the product owners or the stakeholders aren't happy, they've got the opportunity to kind of change direction a little bit.
Yeah.
Going forward. So what that means for developers and feedback is, that every day they're kind of standing together, they're talking about the work they're going to do that day. Every 2 weeks, they're having a review of their progress. So you're getting kind of a constant kind of feedback loop of how you're going. You know, you can see if one person's kind of struggling with their stories and nobody else is, you know, there's a bit of feedback there about that person and how they're kind of facing the project. If you've got someone that's kind of vocal and talking at stand-ups and getting really passionate about it, you know, you're getting a bit of feedback there about what kind of, you know, what they enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, it really sort of narrows that whole loop. If I think of performance, if you think of how you can develop performance, there's really two key ingredients, I think, and that is, one is the expectations of setting out the expectations in the first place, and then that feedback mechanism or feedback loop, and that's a sort of continuous cycle. And Scrum sort of seems to be almost a perfect example of that, because you've got the expectations come in the form of a story, in the form of a user story, that's given to the developer, so they know exactly what the expectations are. It's a really well written expectation, and then every day they get that feedback loop, and every fortnight at the end of the sprint they have the retrospectives that they talk about process improvements and maybe even personal improvements again. So Eytan, I mean, it sounds like you've covered off a lot of bases, in particular HR bases, in those first 5 years. What's the next challenge for you?
Yeah, so I guess, a few challenges now. We're kind of expanding our services to include strategy, so that's going to bring its own kind of HR challenges as we kind of build up a new kind of highly skilled team. But we're also expanding geographically, so we just recently opened an office in Sydney. We have a GM in Sydney that's starting up. So I think, in terms of HR, one of our key challenges is going to make sure that our culture is represented in the new office that builds up in Sydney, and that the values and the way that they do things, it has a similar feel to the way that it's done in Melbourne. Obviously, they're free to kind of do stuff differently where it fits, but we really want it to be a really good cultural fit for the organisation.
Yeah. Well, look, it's been a great discussion, and I'll look forward to hearing maybe in a year's time how that's gone for you.
Great, cheers. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Agent.